If I asked you to name the easternmost state, what would you say? Maybe you'd say Maine. Or maybe you're clever enough to know that nobody bothers to ask a question with such an obvious sounding answer if that answer isn't actually the right one. Sure, Maine certainly seems true on any map, but a quick look at the antimeridian, which separates the eastern and western hemispheres at 180 degrees longitude, and you'll notice a string of islands stretching out from Alaska that crosses over into the eastern hemisphere. These are the Aleutian Islands, a string of volcanically active islands that act as the border between the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea. They also mark the northern border of the Ring of Fire, where the North American and Pacific plates meet, that is a hotbed for earthquakes and volcanic activity. Attu Island is the furthest away from the mainland, 508 kilometers into the eastern hemisphere, though the closest to the antimeridian itself is Semi-Sopignoy Island, just 15.2 kilometers away. The closest that is still in the western hemisphere is Amatanak Island, 59.6 kilometers from this boundary. So in a country that measures 9,429 kilometers long at its furthest points, from the Curry Atoll of Hawaii all the way to Elliott Key, Florida, the points furthest east and west are just 104 kilometers from each other. 74.8 if you just measure from their longitudes. Because Alaska stretches into the eastern hemisphere, the international dateline is shifted so all of Alaska can remain on the same day. But there is a place where you can literally see tomorrow. Travel north a bit and you'll come to two islands, Little and Big Diomede, owned by the States and Russia respectively. Only 4 kilometers apart, the international dateline runs directly between these two islands, resulting in a 20-hour time difference. This means that when the residents of Little Diomede look over to Big Diomede on a Sunday at noon in their time, they're seeing the other island on a Monday at 8 a.m. In the winter, these waters between the two can become so clogged with ice, were it legally permitted, you could literally walk from the States to Russia and into tomorrow. At the southern end of the Ring of Fire exists one of the most intriguing points in the world. Travel down to the Philippines' northernmost island, Luzon Island, and you'll find Taal Lake inside the Batangas province. Inside the lake is the Taal volcano, which, despite being the smallest volcano in the world, is extremely active, with 33 recorded eruptions, the second most in the Philippines. And it has been deadly, claiming over 6,000 lives in its history, but its destruction has led to the creation of one amazing landmark. The crater of the volcano, known as a caldera, is filled with water forming Crater Lake, and inside that lake is a small little rocky point jutting out of the water known as Vulcan Point. That's right, it's an island that is inside of a lake, on an island, in a lake, on an island in the Pacific Ocean. It's what's known as a third-order island, and it's like something out of a Christopher Nolan film. It's kind of odd scientists would bother to name a feature when this is the only one like it, isn't it? Well, they wouldn't, because it isn't. There's another one, a bigger one, on Victoria Island in Canada, and while Vulcan Point is a popular tourist destination, there's a chance nobody has ever stepped foot on this one. Located between the Nunavut and the Northwest Territories, 214 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, Victoria Island is the second biggest island in Canada and the 8th biggest in the world. Found about 120 kilometers north of the southern border of Victoria Island, this unnamed third-order island has an area of approximately 4 acres. It's not too surprising that a third-order island would be found in Canada. After all, Victoria Island is part of the Arctic Archipelago, a series of over 36,000 islands covering an area of over 1.4 million square kilometers. Add in that Canada also contains about half the world's lakes, with 31,752 over 3 square kilometers, and possibly millions more smaller, and the third-order island was bound to exist. However, this nesting doll-like occurrence is not unique to nature. The Dahalakagrawari was, up until May 6, 2015, a territory of India that was the only third-order enclave in the world. Now, an enclave is a territory or part of a territory completely surrounded by another. The Vatican City, the Republic of San Marino, and the Kingdom of Lesotho are all enclave nations, with Lesotho completely surrounded by South Africa and the other two located within the border of Italy. An exclave is a part of a territory geographically separated from the rest, with Alaska being an exclave of the United States because the only way to get to it, over land anyway, is by driving through Canada. Back to the Dahalakagrawari. Now, the Indian and Bangladeshi border has a very complicated history, though they have tried to straighten it out recently by erasing all enclave border lines. There used to be 106 enclaves of India inside Bangladesh and 92 enclaves of Bangladesh inside India. Of those, there were 24 counter-enclaves, which means a portion of India is inside Bangladesh that is inside India, or vice versa. But the Dahalakagrawari was a 2-acre enclave of India that was actually owned by a Bangladeshi farmer, meaning he had to wake up every morning and walk to another nation in order to tend to his crops. Now, this piece of Indian land was actually located inside Bangladesh, that was inside India, that again was located inside Bangladesh. All of these enclaves had posed a major problem as people would be trapped there, because they couldn't travel through the other country to a different part of their own without a passport, but couldn't get a passport unless they left their enclave. Now many people who are citizens of one country are just living in the wrong one. Much simpler, really. Just as odd as land that is part of a country that is inside another country that is inside the first one that is inside the second one again, is land that is not claimed by any country at all, like Bir Tawil, which has an area of 2,060 square kilometers and is located on the border of Egypt and Sudan. The story of Bir Tawil began in 1899 when the area was still under British rule and they decided to use the 22nd parallel as the border between the two countries, not taking into account the unofficial tribal and cultural borders that had already been in place. 3 years later, they set a new border to better reflect those differences. The only problem are the two land masses that change sides depending on which border is used, Bir Tawil and the Halaib Triangle. Both nations lay claim to the Halaib Triangle because it is bigger than Bir Tawil, has access to the Red Sea, and is actually habitable. And to claim this land means to give up Bir Tawil, which is fine by both countries. We've talked about a few strange borders, but what about an area that doesn't have any? Off the southeastern coast of the United States and north of the Caribbean islands, you can find the Sargasso Sea, the only sea in the world without a land border. It is named after a type of free-floating seaweed called sargassum that is unique in that it reproduces while floating on the water rather than on the ocean floor like most seaweed. It is actually 4 different currents that separate this area from the rest of the Atlantic Ocean: the Gulf Stream on the west, the North Atlantic Current on the north, the Canary Current on the east, and the North Atlantic Equatorial Current on the south. The currents surrounding the sea have done 2 things. The first is they have kept this area warmer, bluer, and calmer than the rest of the Atlantic Ocean. The second is that they funnel all refuse into this area, which has unfortunately resulted in the North Atlantic Garbage Patch, the lesser-known cousin to the Pacific Garbage Patch.